are back. At least I'm back. I'm Ralph Tyko. It's Giants baseball, past, present, and future. And I'm not alone. Timmy Haller's not here. Patrick Quinlan's not here. But Marc Weiss, that's Mark with a C, in case you're looking for him on Facebook or in any other way. And he's a guest today. He's a fellow podcaster at the Comfortably Zoned Radio Network, the station that we're on. And I'm happy to have you, Mark. What it is.
I'm glad to be here. And you earlier said that with all the utility work that I've been doing, I'm the Junior Gilliam of the network. But for today, I guess I'm more of the Dusty Rhodes of the network.
Well, pinch hitting for Timmy, who is indisposed, and for Patrick, who is the prodigal son at this point. We're happy to have you. If you could do the job that Dusty Rhodes did in the 1954 World Series, we'd be grateful. If you could just be a major leaguer, we'll be grateful. Doesn't matter. Whatever you want, you know. Whoever these guys are that we as fans think of ourselves as, they make the major leagues. That's no small feat. All these kids that grow up want to be in the big league someday, play little league. What a minute percentage of kids that make it to their goal, and how cool it is to have that kind of attitude and respect for the guys that we cover. And you're one of those that has that exact attribute. So welcome to the network belatedly, the Junior Gilliam. You're a Dodger fan.
I am a Dodger fan. I mean, I go to a lot of Met games because I live here in New York, and my friends are all Met fans. But if the Mets are playing the Dodgers, I'm rooting Dodgers. They know that.
Right.
Absolutely.
But you're also a baseball historian, and I want to get an idea from you because you're a native New Yorker. All the shows that I've been doing on the network, where we do a Dodgers show, we have gone back and forth as the cause of the Giants and Dodgers both moving to the West Coast. The Giants moved to San Francisco, the Dodgers to L.A., and Walter O'Malley's involvement in it. I want to get an idea from you. You're a baseball historian. What was Horace Stoneham's mindset? Was he going along just the team was about to go to Minneapolis, and it was my understanding they were negotiating with the city of New York separately. Can you pick it up from there and fill me in on how it was to come that they suddenly moved, changed their plans, and they were in San Francisco? I know it takes two teams on the West Coast to make a go of it. And did O'Malley talk him into it? Was it mutual? Take it from here, Marc Weiss.
So it's an interesting story, and there's so many moving parts to it that I think that we probably won't know 100% the full truth. Just it's kind of like there's no Zapruder film when it comes to the Giants and Dodgers leaving New York, but we do know that there's a lot of conspiracy and a lot of things that went on with it. I think the first thing if we take a step back and go to the fact that the Giants had the Minneapolis Millers as their number one farm team, their AAA farm team. And the Millers did well. I mean, they drew well, and a lot of the Giant players came through Minneapolis before they got to New York. And so Horace Stoneham's thought process was, I could bring the team over to Minneapolis, get a public stadium from those guys, and I know I can do well there because the fans will come out because they know these players, or at least 2/3 to 3/4 of my team. And so that was his thought process. He started thinking about leaving probably in the early 50s when he started noticing he had a really good ball club, but he wasn't drawing well. And a lot of people attributed it to that the Polo Grounds, let's just say, was getting a little long in the tooth, and the city wasn't exactly spending money to upkeep it. Plus, it was never a baseball designed stadium. I mean, it did so much better for New York Giants football as far as the layout than it did for New York Giants baseball, because it was 257 down the lines, and dead center with the clubhouse was over 500 feet. So it was a nuanced place, but I think that he realized that he wanted a baseball stadium. He also was growing weary of the fact that he felt the neighborhood around it was starting to go into urban decay, and he blamed that for his attendance. But quite honestly, Stoneham wasn't a great businessman either. And so I think he outwardly voiced his opinion that he was going to leave and was looking for options. O'Malley was the tricky one. O'Malley played the I'm trying to stay in Brooklyn game for a long time. I want to build a dome. He even commissioned a bunch of architects from Princeton to design a dome. And he had this design that he showed people, but he asked for the impossible. He wanted the land over on Flatbush Avenue and Atlantic and 4th Avenue, which was heavy traffic, a lot of trains there, and he wanted them to build him a dome stadium over the train yards. And he knew he wasn't going to get that, and he pitted himself against Robert Moses, who was the power broker here in New York. He's the guy who built the highways and all the public works projects. And I think O'Malley did that on purpose to make himself look like he's a good guy and he wants to stay in Brooklyn. He lives in Long Island. His fans are here. But then when they offered him Queens, the Flushing Meadow site where the Mets play, he said, I'm the Brooklyn Dodgers, not the Queens Dodgers. So I don't want to go there. And that's when you start to believe that he had his exit strategy. But the problem was he wanted to go to Los Angeles, California, which he had originally bought Wrigley Field in Los Angeles, and he owned that, and it was too small for Major League Baseball, but he bought it to get the territorial rights, so that if he moved there, he wouldn't get sued by the PCL. So he already had his exit strategy going, but he was playing coy. He started by kicking Branch Rickey out of the mix in the early 50s by buying him out. He got rid of Red Barber. He started doing a lot of things to the team where the team was the first and foremost to integrate, and by the mid-50s when he assumed control, he was less into keeping his team integrated and more into trying to put a national product out there, a.k.a. putting more white people out there on the field, which kept a great player like Roberto Clemente stuck in AAA. Under Branch Rickey, there's no way Clemente would have languished in AAA. He would have been the starting left fielder for the Dodgers. But this was the way O'Malley worked. But to get to California, the only way he could get there was to have a willing accomplice to come with him, and he knew Stoneham was thinking of moving anyway, and so his goal was, let's drag old Horace out there with me, and I have two teams out in California. Major League Baseball is going to approve it. So that's kind of the nutshell of it. And
what did he say to Horace to convince him?
Well, he convinced him that, hey, come to California. The weather's great. The fans are great because the Pacific Coast League had great fans. As a matter of fact, there were people who talked about the Pacific Coast League in the 30s and 40s as being just like a tick below Major League Baseball. And a lot of guys,
there were players that would prefer to play in the PCL and made more money due to a number of things, the length of schedule, but it was a great league, terrific league. The Maggios came out of there. Naming just a few.
It was great league. You had Lefty O'Doul, Tony Lazzari. These guys. Ted Williams came out of the Pacific Coast League. He played for the San Diego Padres.
Right. No. Charlie Silvera, longtime Yankee catcher, was a PCLer. Still going, Charlie. About 95 years old, still ticking.
God bless.
God bless him. An inspiration. Amazing, just off the subject a little bit, on players over 90, the Yankees have in their alum like 7, 8 guys who are 90 plus, including Charlie Silvera, whom I interviewed, and Dr. Brown, who I interviewed, and 4 or 5 other guys that are just hanging in there. So, and
I think
with all
Whitey's
their,
close to 90.
right, isn't it? That's amazing. Makes me feel ancient being 70. And
State of mind only. Don't read the numbers.
Absolutely. Oh yeah, all that stuff. And they tell me like 70's the new 68. So
It averages out somewhere like that, doesn't it?
It doesn't encourage me all that much. But nevertheless, I want to, as long as I still have all my brains, I want to get as many folks like yourself on these airways to clarify what really went on back in the day, as they say in baseball.
Well,
so,
I could bring it. I'd like to bring it a step back even before that, because I did some research a lot of years ago and read a book called Twilight Teams, and the book's premise was about all of these teams in Major League Baseball that changed cities after the Second World War. Supposedly, the powers that be in baseball decided that they didn't want to have expansion because they felt that expansion would water down the talent pool, which I guess in essence when it happened it really did, so I guess they were right about that. But they also felt that they would have to share their piece of the pie, and they really didn't want to. But they realized that each of these teams that had a second team in their town, there was always a primary team and a secondary team, and the secondary teams were drawing table scraps and making very little money. Like in Philadelphia, the A's just always were second fiddle to the Phillies. Not that the Phillies had great teams, but the A's just seemed to play second fiddle to them. The Braves up in Boston, the Browns in St. Louis. So the goal of MLB was to go to these cities that had multiple teams and move a team or team out of there and get them into another city to branch out baseball, but yet they wouldn't have to expand. And that was kind of baseball's goal after World War II. And you see it happen because I think the first ones out of town were the Braves moved from Boston to Milwaukee. And they did really well there. Well, I'll get back to that point in a second. And there was St. Louis,
Baltimore,
the Browns moved to Baltimore and became the Orioles, and the A's moved to Kansas City from Philadelphia. The goal was to spread the wealth out and move them around. Now, what happened was they also looked at New York and said, New York doesn't need three teams. They wanted to get one of those two National League teams out of New York and get them somewhere else. They just didn't realize that both of them wanted to get out of New York, and then eventually they realized that they wanted to get out to that West Coast. They wanted to get there in the worst way because they knew it was an untapped market, and I believe it was that Mr. Greeley guy who said, go west, young man. And people were actually moving west from New York out to California. It was the land of milk and honey. And they figured, you know what, we've got to get some major league presence there. They came to the conclusion that if they went with an expansion team or with a poor franchise, like moving a St. Louis Browns or moving a Philadelphia A's franchises that were always in the second division, California fans would not embrace a loser. And that's why Major League Baseball was so receptive to both the Giants and the Dodgers with their storied history, bringing their rivalry and going out there. So it's not like Major League Baseball wasn't a big part of the O'Malley-Stoneham move. They were definitely pushing the buttons from behind the scenes. They figured, hey, New York still has the Yankees. What's the big deal? I mean, I don't think they ever grasped the whole National League concept of how New York was a National League town. But they didn't care. They just wanted to get teams all over the place. And quite frankly, they weren't going to expand until Branch Rickey became the front man for the ill-fated Continental League. And every city that Branch Rickey wanted to put a team in for the Continental League turned out to be cities where they expanded.
Right. Ended up with teams. And what's really ironic is what you mentioned about the fear of Californians not accepting a losing team or a losing franchise because all that's secular or secular or whatever it is. But the Giants in San Francisco were made up mostly of, especially the coaching staff and Willie, at the very beginning of former New York Giants. And San Francisco was very quick, very slow to accept Willie and those who played in New York. They wanted their own identity. It would have been better off if New York kept eminent domain on those two names and let the Dodgers be something else out in California. Let the Giants be the Seals or whatever. It just would have been better for all concerned, because not that the Mets replacing both the Giants and Dodgers for a lot of people weren't terrific, and they're still my team. They never left me. I love them. I follow the Giants. I'm an apologist for the Giants. I do the show with Tim Haller for the Giants, but I'm a New York Giant fan, and it wasn't the same for either Brooklyn Dodger fans or New York Giant fans having the Mets. It just it was kind of really weird, as a matter of fact. The coloring of the uniforms, just the way they marketed the team in the early years. They had these old Charlie Neal, Duke Snider, the old Dodgers that they'd bring in that were over the hill, and it was.
Well, that was a concerted strategy. When George Weiss took over the Mets, the first thing he did was they brought in Casey Stengel to manage the team. Not because Casey was going to be the old witty professor and steal them a pennant, but because they wanted him to be the ultimate front man and distract people from the fact that what the product they were going to put on the field was not going to win. And once they realized that they weren't going to win, they went heavy with the ex-New York players because they wanted the nostalgia factor and also to ingratiate the Brooklyn and the New York Giant fan into the fold, so they started rooting for the Mets. And I think it was a very smart strategy, because the year before, when the Angels came in as an expansion team, the American League opened up their coffers and let them actually draft good players from other teams, and they had a decent team. And owners are like, wait a second, brand new team, and they're playing well, and they're playing with our players. The next batch of expansion, I mean, they basically had the has-beens, the never-wases, and the diamonds in a rough. That's what was available.
And some, like Felix Mantilla, Frank Thomas, these guys were contributing guys. Richie Ashburn, just a year or two before, injuries got him. Hodges, Woodling was hurt.
Right.
Ashburn was much slower than he had been. It was a horror show, but mainly they recruited Brooklyn Dodgers, ex-Brooklyn Dodgers, not New York Giants. Very few New York Giants former New York Giants played for the Mets. And a lot of it was marketing. They brought in Joe Ginsberg and Clem Labine to spring training, and they had him up for a few games, and then they cut him. So they were clearly trying to get the Jewish vote with Ginsberg, the Dodger loyalty, like I say, with Hodges and Charlie Neal, who was a shell of his former self. His career went downhill very quickly. He was MVP or Rookie of the Year in '59 when the Dodgers were already out here. By '62, as an expansion New York Met, he sucked. I mean, I was one of those who sat there and watched, and he wasn't alone. But that's another story. What I want to know, how close the Giants were to going to Minneapolis. I remember
very close.
Yeah, I remember wearing a Minneapolis Giant T-shirt. Now, I don't know if it's because they had a minor league team, which they did, or if it was when they were about to move when I was 10, and that was '56. So I think they were close. Did O'Malley queer the deal and claim territorial rights because he owned the St. Paul team, was a Dodger farm club at the time. Giants had Minneapolis, but they were right next door. So was that part of? Go ahead.
Yeah, they were sister cities, and I know any any move that O'Malley made in his career as owner of the Dodgers or partner of the Dodgers always had something to do with something. It was always money driven, and it was always about trying to be 2 or 3 steps ahead of the rest of the guys. And that's what he did. And I think that he wanted to make it tougher on Stoneham to move cleanly to Minneapolis. There's no question about it. But he also knew that he needed him to get to California, because Major League Baseball said, look, we want that market, but there's no way that one team alone can go out there by themselves, because at that point jet travel was just starting to become something they could do. And the league did not want to see a team fly out there for 3 games and have to fly back east after that.
Right, to make him go from one city to the next,
exactly,
right on the coast, and that made a hell of a lot of sense. It would have been great. It would have been better for the Giants had the stadium that they built. They tore down a hill or a mountain that prevented wind from coming in. They misjudged the amount of wind that was a factor, and the heaters that were initially installed at Candlestick Park never worked. They had heaters for the seats, so you'd sit there at night and freeze your butt off. Believe me, I sat there many times. They even awarded fans that sat there with the croix de candlestick, they called it, little pin that they gave you on your way out of a night game if you sat there for the full game in the cold. And people would wear them on their caps, and it was a sign of pride. It was horrible to watch a ball game in, and I think that things would have been different for Stoneham. I mean, right now they're in a beautiful gem of a ballpark downtown San Francisco. It's a dream come true. They privately financed, as a matter of fact, first team to do that, to the best of my knowledge. And it worked out beautifully for them. But Horace has been long dead, and they spent a lot of years almost moving from San Francisco. Things got so desperate for a number of years. So I just
well, you bring up
clarity.
some good points about Stoneham, though, too, because while it turned out that Stoneham was really kind of a kind owner to his ball players, sometimes they said he got a little close to his favorites, which could always be a problem, no question about it, when any boss is closer to one employee than they are to another, especially for the manager who gets their head stepped on. But in Stoneham's case, he was not a great businessman. And O'Malley said originally when they went out there, I want you to pick whichever city of the 2 you want to go to. Now, he even said to him, but, I understand
said that to Stoneham?
Yeah, and he said to him, but I know L.A. is – because he needed Stoneham to go out with him, and he said to him, but I know L.A., they're fair weather fans. The weather's nice. They want to be on the beach. They want to do other things. That's a tough road to go. San Francisco, the Seals had always been the preeminent team in the Pacific Coast League. They had great fans. They had great attendance. They were a model franchise. He said, and San Fran has great weather. And what he purposely did is he took them to Candlestick Point at about 1 o'clock in the afternoon before the fog came in off the bay, and it dropped about 40 degrees. And Stoneham looked out onto the bay, and he saw how beautiful it was and how great the weather was. And he was like, you're right, I'm taking San Francisco. You can have L.A. And once again, O'Malley, the shrewd businessman that he was, set up Stoneham like you wouldn't believe, and Stoneham takes San Francisco hook, line, and sinker, and O'Malley runs to the bank taking Los Angeles and draws 3 million fans a year for God knows how many years.
That is a very, very interesting theory. I never heard the fact that Stoneham actually had a choice, and that it was O'Malley that took him out to Candlestick Point, because he did go out and visited the property, and the wind was not blowing, and then game time it would blow.
They purposely made him see the property at 1 in the afternoon when the sun was at its apex. It was beautiful. And I know exactly what you're talking about, how cold it is there, because I used to work out on the coast. I worked in the Bay Area for a company where I would go out like 1 week a month, and I'd have to work out of their office. And on Wednesdays, we would kind of play a little bit of hooky, and we'd take the BARD into the city, and we'd go catch a ball game. And it was 102 degrees out in Pleasanton that day. It was really, really hot. And I'm wearing a T-shirt and shorts to go into the city. I get there, and it's about like 85 degrees in San Francisco or something like that. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, shorts and a T-shirt's the right move. Then I watched the fog and the wind come in off the bay, and it dropped about 40 degrees, and I had to go buy a hoodie and sweatpants because I was freezing. And so
Absolutely.
I was fooled just like Mr.
Cold.
Stoneham was fooled.
Yeah. And, by the way, it's been cold out at Chase Stadium at times, too, much the same way with the wind blowing.
Well, we have a philosophy with Citi Field and Chase Stadium back when we used to go to the games then. If it says it's 80 degrees out, dress like it's 60 degrees if you're going to sit inside there because the wind comes off Flushing Bay and it whips around and it gets cold.
Right. I had no idea, or at least I forgot that you lived out in the Bay Area. And what years were those, Mark?
I worked for a company back in 2000, and I worked for them for about 9 months, and once a week, each of those 9 months, I'd have to come out there for meetings and whatever other stuff we were doing out of there. And typically Wednesday was kind of low in the week, so that's when I'd go hit the town. I actually caught a ton of Oakland A's games because the A's were rather good back then, and
right,
I caught a lot of their games.
And as is Pleasanton.
And yeah, so I would take the BART, 2 stops, and I was at the Oakland Coliseum and caught the A's game. In fact, I was at the Jeter game with the flip ball and all that good stuff. I bought a playoff ticket
with Giambi.
With Giambi's brother, I don't even call him Giambi, I call him Giambi's brother.
Right.
But the thing was, I could buy a playoff ticket for an Oakland A's game for the day of the game and pay face value for it. Whereas if I wanted to go to a Met or a Yankee playoff game, I'd have to pay 2 or 3 times face value to go to a playoff game.
Absolutely. What brought you back to New York?
And that's not knocking fans or anything like that. I just think the New York fan is just so rabid with baseball.
Do you miss California?
I used to like going out there. I really did. And I had a boss who actually lived in Southern California, so every so often I'd have to fly out there and spend a week out there with him. I used to fly into Orange County, and you could see the Angels there because that's where the Angels are. But I was like out there, and I'm like, dude, you got to take me to see a Dodger game. Like, I'm a Dodger fan. I've never been to Dodger Stadium. And he was like, no, you can't go to the game. It's going to be too much traffic. I'm like, well, let's leave early. Of course, that's when I learned about Dodger fans show up in the 3rd and leave in the 7th inning because of all the traffic. But it was so different going to a game.
He was right on that concern.
He was. And the thing is, we got to the game and we're watching it, and I'm a typical New York fan. When I get into the game, I'm yelling and I'm screaming and I'm rooting, and everyone's staring at me, and he's like, dude, he goes, nobody acts like this over here. I'm like, well, isn't this how you root for your team? He goes, no, we're very calm and we're laid back. I said, that's not the way I was brought up to be at a game. Like, I'm yelling, I'm screaming, I'm up and down. And he goes, no, it's not how we do it over here. I said, well, maybe you guys need a little more of that.
Right. Hey, Mark, thank you. This was a terrific episode. We got some clarity on the way it was back in the day when the Giants were the New York Giants, and suddenly they were the San Francisco Giants. But there was that moment there. They could have been the Minneapolis Giants, and they would.
Oddsmakers say there's about 70% chance they were going to go to Minneapolis.
At a certain point, they were gone. O'Malley was a slick mother. Let it be said, too, that he was making the most money of any National League owner. They were turning a big profit to Dodgers.
They were. But O'Malley had envy. And you see, the worst thing to happen to Brooklyn was the Braves moving from Boston to Milwaukee. Because they moved to Milwaukee, they got this big, huge stadium right off of the interstate. They were drawing upwards of 2+ million fans a year. And O'Malley's sitting there and watching this in 53, 54, and 55, and 56, and he's saying to himself, I have this small little ballpark in Brooklyn in an area that's starting to decay a little bit, and I'm fighting to draw 1.5 million fans because I only can seat 35,000, and the Braves are this brand new hot thing going west, and they're getting tons of people in Milwaukee, which doesn't even have a third of the amount of people New York has, probably even less than that, and they're outdrawing me, and I want something bigger, badder, and better. And I think that his envy, because he was an envious kind of dude, he always wanted more money. I mean, people always say that the OM stands for not O'Malley, but O'Money because of the way he acted. And that, I think that's what flipped the light switch to him and said, I'm leaving New York unless they give me a big stadium where I want it. And I personally think he never, ever negotiated with New York, on the up and up. I think he always knew where he wanted to go. I think MLB was behind him getting there. And when the council in Los Angeles gave him that give or take, that take it or leave it offer, they gave him 24 hours to take it or leave it. With the free land to build his own palace, he was taking it, and he was never coming. He was never back. That's what he wanted to get, and he got what he wanted.
And you know what? Because of television money that was down the road, things might have been different for him in an even more profitable manner had he stayed in Brooklyn.
You're probably right.
Money came in. That's something I just. What do you say to that?
Well, that's a great point, but I think the television aspect of it was another thing that pushed him out of New York was the fact that he viewed himself like people talk about the Braves being America's team, like with TBS, and they were on everyone's home, and people saw them in the 70s and 80s, and that's what built up their following. Well, the Dodgers were America's team in the 50s. They were constantly on national TV when they were the game of the week because they were the marquee franchise, and they had players. They were very diverse, and people liked watching that team and liked rooting for them. They had colorful characters. And WOR, which was their flagship station that later became the Met station, it had a very strong signal. And so WOR reached a lot of places as well. And so he realized that he was a national team. Even though he played that I'm the Brooklyn Dodgers, not the Queens Dodgers when they offered him Flushing Meadows, he knew he was a national team. He even started playing games in Jersey City in 56 and 57 just to kind of prove that he could draw outside of the confines of Brooklyn. So I think TV actually pushed him to think that he had a national presence as well. But your point is spot on that I think that with the way TV really exploded and the cable deals exploded, he'd have the same boatload of money that the Wilpons make with the Mets. If not more.
The Yankees make with their TV, their Yes station, and TV is everything these days.
TV's everything because people. Well, that's what actually hurt him in the 50s. He claimed that TV was actually hurting him a little bit because people would rather stay home and watch the Dodger game on TV than travel into Brooklyn with no parking from Long Island or from New Jersey on weeknight games.
No, it's been proven that TV did not set back attendance. And what is
I agree with you.
To me,
but it's a great excuse, though, if you're him, to use it as a way of getting out.
Oh yeah. He was a slick gentleman, and I was going to use an expression.
Both him and George Steinbrenner did the same thing. I was going to say both him and George Steinbrenner did the same thing to New York, trying to say it's the neighborhood and that's why we can't draw. Well, the Yankees couldn't draw in the late 80s and early 90s because their product on the field was putrid. But then once they started winning pennants and World Series again and putting a dynasty team, they were drawing 4 million fans in the South Bronx without any problem. So it's got nothing to do with the ballpark.
It's interesting to me when the Giants and Dodgers left, the Yankees were great teams, and they didn't draw any more when the Dodgers and Giants left than they did the year before. If anything, they drew less.
Absolutely truthful. Totally truthful.
Am I right about that?
You're absolutely right. And I could use an example, like my mom and my grandparents, die-hard Brooklyn Dodger fans. Like, my mother worshipped the ground that Jackie Robinson walked on. I mean, as a matter of fact, I can tell you a quick story about her unfortunately, when she was very sick and she was passing, she had almost like this pseudo dementia. She would ask me, like, how'd Jackie do today? How'd the Dodgers do? And I'm like, Ma, they've been gone for like 45 years. And she's like, no. It's like that's how ingrained they were in her brain, that she went back to that in her mind in her latter days. But they were diehard Dodger fans. They lived and bled Dodger blue. And when they left, they didn't care about baseball at all. at all. They wouldn't even track it in the newspaper. They didn't even care about the box scores. They would show the games back here in New York, and they would talk about it because they figured the fans would still watch them even though they were gone. Or when they went to Philadelphia, they wouldn't even think of getting in the car and driving down to Philadelphia to watch them play when they came to Philadelphia.
No, they wouldn't show games. The best they would show, they'd have Les Kiter doing recreations.
Oh, yes, the facsimile recreation games. You're right.
Right, which kept kids going a little bit, but and yes, you could go to Philly and catch them when they come in, the Giants. But wow, it hurt being a kid and losing your team. And
I got an interesting fact for you. The first, 2 or 3 years that the Mets were in existence, 62, 63, and 64, horrible teams, right? I mean, I think if we say the word horrible, we're probably understating it. I mean, that's how really bad that they were. They outdrew the Yankees, who were winning World Series and pennants.
Absolutely, and arguably, I say 61 was the best of all the dynasty. It's arguably, that was a great team. They had 4 catches, 20 home runs each, 3 catches.
An embarrassment of riches, as my grandfather would say.
Right, exactly. They were lucky they didn't get hurt. They didn't have all these guys played like 162 games in 61. That was a team to be talked about on a future show for sure, and a very interesting team, as a matter of fact.
I'll tell you,
we're running up against.
I was going to say one quick thing, and then we could split.
Yeah, if we're on, point, there's nobody listening at this point.
I was going to say to your point about the attendance, though. If you look at Game 163, when Maris was trying to break the record, there was nobody in the stands other than right field to catch the ball. Today's day and age, if someone's trying to break a home run record, the place would be swamped.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. But there were a number of things that make it different. The price of tickets. You could buy a box seat for $325.
Yeah, you could.
In 1961, and you can talk about inflation till you're blue in the face, but it's only like 7 times inflation for every day. Dry cleaning costs you 7 times, whatever. Baseball, like a ticket today, a box seat today is like $250. Nuts, or more, and it's become a corporate game, and it's taken the fandom out of it.
I sit in the Euchre seat, so.
Yeah, that's right. And the Euchre seats is sometimes the best seat in the house. Really.
Best people are there.
For best people, absolutely. And, it's like heaven or hell. You go to heaven for the ambiance, but hell for the people. So if you want to put it that way. Mark, you're the people, and before I let you go, you and Ian Kahanowitz have teamed up for a terrific show called Genesis on the Comfortably Zoned Radio Network, which we're both a part of. And if you'd be good enough to give me an idea about what you guys talk about, and I listen. It's fun. You have a way of communicating with each other that's terrific. How are you taking to it?
Well, it's a lot of fun. I think we really complement each other very, very well. Ian has great connections with a lot of authors, people who have written some great sports books. I've seen to tap into like former players, guys like we were talking about earlier about like maybe they weren't superstars. They had a little cup of coffee, or they played like 5 or 6 years as the 4th or 5th outfielder, but they know so much. They're so passionate. And you know what? They made it to the show. I didn't get anywhere near that show. So I'm envious of their skill set and the people they know and the stories they have. And so we bring those folks on, and we have a lot of fun with it. Like, we don't grill them, and we just want to have a good time with it. We joke around. We laugh about it, because when the day's done, if we're not having fun, the listener's not having fun. And so we have a lot of fun with it. And I think we've got some good people coming up. I think next week we have Carl Erskine coming on board, which for me as a Dodger fan, it's like one of the holy grails of being a Dodger fan. So that's great. We have Professor Golenbach is joining us to talk about what he's working on, and we've got a few other people coming down the road too. Some folks one person who wrote the Marvin Miller book, which I love Marvin Miller. I think he not being in the Hall of Fame means the Hall of Fame is empty in my mind, but that's good. I think we might have Gil Hodges' daughter on, and of course Gil's another one who I want in the Hall of Fame. So we've got a good cast of people who've been joining us. I think Ian does a great job of booking people, and I stick my 2 cents in. But it's just a lot of fun, and he also gives me a lot of latitude to go off and go crazy and joke around about things and stuff like that. So I mean, we just work well together. So all's good. I tell everyone, tune in. You'll laugh. Trust me, you will.
Absolutely, I can attest to that. Thank you, sir. And again, this is a Comfortably Zoned Radio Network. The guest has been Marc Weiss, Marc with a C, from New York, Staten Island, New York. And I'm glad you're recovering, and thank you for being Junior Gilliam.
My pleasure to be Junior Gilliam. I just want to do a shout out to Tim Haller, who's not with you today. He's on assignment. Timmy owes me one. He's got to join my show because we want to talk about all the great days that his dad had playing for the Giants and the Dodgers. So Timmy, if you're listening, you owe us one. We need you on the show.
Beautiful. I'll let him know. We'll post the show on his page.
Awesome.
Thank you, my friend.
Always, my friend. Anytime you need me, you know I'm there.
I know you are. Continue to recover, and everybody out there, keep on keeping on. We'll catch you on the flip-flop. Adios.